Hello and welcome back to another episode of NT Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, on YouTube and all the podcast platforms at NT Movie Reviews, as well as on all social media platforms at NT Movie Reviews. Today I'm joined by director Claire Frances Byrne for her debut film, Ready or Not. What Katie and her mates think will be a carefree summer chilling out on their Dublin housing estate in the late 90s turns more complicated when they're pushed towards an adulthood that they're ill prepared for. Claire, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on your debut film. How does it feel to be taking this story international now?
Thank you, Nick, and thanks for having me. It's great. Like it was really nerve-wracking on Wednesday, kind of rocking up to the cinema and knowing that there was a US audience seeing it for the first time. It's a very Irish film. It's a very Irish story told in a very, kind of local way. Although, the reason why we made it is obviously because of the universal themes of it all. But I was nervous. And then the kind of audiences that SIF brings in are just such diehard fans of like small independent world cinema. It's kind of it's been really refreshing actually all week to just sort of see the crowds that are flocking to these films that they might not get a chance to see again. And so it was nerve-wracking, but I was very relieved and felt very supported. And yeah, it was a buzz, to hear the positive feedback from kind of the other side of the world to where we made our story. It was really cool.
Oh, that's wonderful. One of the things I've always loved about this festival is the diversity of the attendance that you bring in. So many fans of film, whether you're a film critic like myself or a fan of film who just walks up to the box office to buy a ticket. There's just so much access to so many films from all across the world. It's just so cool to have a light shown on these stories. And anybody who watches Ready or
Yeah.
Not, as many Irishisms as there are, as many things that may feel, completely and uniquely Irish. There are so many themes that really do resonate in this film that I am already seeing audiences kind of tapping into in a way. And one
Mm.
of the biggest things that stood out for me, because it's something that the film does incredibly well, is it balances humor and drama. It
Mhm.
balances so much of the reality of what it is to be 13, to be in those kind of formative years. Your body's changing, your
Mhm.
hormones are changing, the world is shifting around you, and especially in the late 90s, I can only speak for America here, but in this country we have had issues when it comes to comprehensive sex education, when it comes to
Yeah.
access to contraceptives and discussions about consent and so many things like that. And there is this aspect of thinking back to what that time would be like in the late 90s when you
Mm.
really don't have communication elsewhere other than what's around you. So much is learned.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, because I can only speak to it in America. Has there been a struggle in Ireland too, in the sense of comprehensive sex education and some of these topics?
Yeah, like I think it's kind of in our DNA that there's like a conservatism from, being a heavily Catholic country. I think it's sort of in our DNA for a long time that sex is a taboo subject and it's something that you don't talk about out and proud, it's you don't ask those questions. And as a result of that, and we never really got any kind of actual sex education, in school. Even my generation didn't. I think it was all about it was all about self-hygiene and stuff like this. It wasn't really about sex. And so, as a result of that, I think, yeah, you end up going out into the wild and you're learning like bits and pieces of information from usually older boys because like weirdly as well, I think especially in the kind of community that we're living in this film, like it was always slightly older boys with younger girls, and that's how these younger girls were shown the ropes in a way and kind of got all their information in a really garbled up wrong way. So
Sure.
there's definitely a history of lack of education in Ireland for sure. And a lack of sort of being able to just talk about it. Even certain generations, like my parents' generation and those that went before, you're talking about people who grew up petrified of sex. And it was like if you have sex and you get pregnant, you'll get sent away. So it was a fear, in those kind of older generations. So yeah, it's definitely like a result of that
Sure.
for sure.
Do you see any of that shifting today in Ireland? It was interesting. The opening film for the festival was another Irish set film, Four Mothers,
Yeah.
kind of tapping into some of the LGBTQ experience a little bit in Ireland and dealing with some
Yeah.
of that. You've got this older generation of mothers who don't understand it,
Yeah.
who have love
Yeah.
for their children, but there's this disconnect, but you feel this build up. It almost feels like so much of this has been coming, so much change has been coming.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a shift just in how people speak about about sex, about their pride, about who they
Yeah.
are, and owning a little bit more of their agency, perhaps?
Yeah, 1000%. Like we're celebrating 10 years of marriage equality at home at the moment, which is a big
Oh,
milestone for us. In 2015 we made gay marriage legal. So if you tap into any kind of Irish social media at the moment, it's all about our 10-year anniversary for that. And I mean, it definitely has, we've also moved away. My generation were the generation that kind of got to grow up separate to the church, more or less. Like
mhm.
I still had my Holy Communion and my confirmation and all that sort of stuff. But like I very much was allowed to grow up into an adult completely separate from the church, and definitely that shame. Look, it's probably still there in the back of my head somewhere, but like I
Hovering.
think, yeah, yeah, I think my generation and the ones that are younger than me now are 1000% living their, you know, best lives, and I don't want to just like talk shit about the education system because I'm sure they are addressing sexual education now. We would hope that they're doing it as young as primary school, but
Sure,
I'm sure that has come a long way as well. I just don't know enough about
sure,
it yet.
sure. Well, no,
Yeah.
no. Thank you for sharing that. And I that was something I didn't know about the 10 years of the Irish celebration. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is wonderful.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
Something that I loved about this film and what you allow these young actresses to do, especially, or what you shine a light on. The teenage experience is something we see a lot in film. Oftentimes, the kids are played by 20-something-year-olds. So there is
Yeah.
sometimes maybe a disconnect and like, okay, they almost maybe feel like that their age. But so many of these films are male dominated. The people who get to be stupid, the people who get to be silly and foul-mouthed are usually all boys. And in my
Mhm.
experience growing up, I knew there were just as many women, many girls in my life who were
Yeah.
more foul-mouthed than some of the boys, who said things that were just as offensive. What were you looking forward to in sharing a story that allows young women to be represented in a way that just feels completely true? Because I know so many people know so many funny women in their lives.
Like I think we all know if you grew up in Ireland, you all know a Danny, you all know a Katie, you all know Sarah, you know what I mean? Like they're definitely like these archetypes of people that we all grew up with, which is nice. And Lynn Ruan, the writer, like she just wrote such a funny script from day one. Like it was always really funny and it was always really dark. And there was darkness in it, but it was always just like peppered with so much humor because that's how when she was young, she was coping with some of these similar experiences. So that was a joy to read whenever she would really, go be really authentic with and really relatable with the humor. And it reminded me of like my family stories and stuff, like the little phrases that you hear growing up. It was really fun to be able to just kind of go really, really hard on using our kind of isms in Dublin and just our funny little quips and like the way that we kind of handle sticky situations by just slagging each other off most of the time. So yeah, that was a joy. And I think the girls, like Danny in particular, like she brings so much comic relief, I think, to this story. And
Shit
Molly
is
Molly
hilarious.
Byrne, who played her, is just like she's as funny as that in everyday life. She just had us on the floor, like laughing. So yeah, it was great to get all that in. And I'm glad that you like picked up on that. It's nice that that is what people are getting from it.
Could have had a running list of the Irish phrases or slang words where I'm like, what did they keep saying here? How I'm like they keep talking about getting rode, and I'm like, is this? I'm like in my head, in my America brain, I'm like, that's pretty out there, but it's just so casual, and it just there's so many. I'm serious. I had a running list going for a little while, and I was like, I gotta stop. I'm like, there's just too many good
Yeah.
ones. I'm gonna have to learn how to use these in my real
I
life.
think you need
But
to you need to take that one and bring it home. Like the riding thing is like, you're riding meaning you're having sex, or like a ride is someone who's like really sexy. So that's another one that we say all the time. It's like, oh, you're such a ride.
That I was like, I was picking up on that one, and I was kind of like, okay, I was like, I think I know what's going on here, and I was like, there's this aspect of weirdly for as foul-mouthed as Americans can be, sometimes there's
Yeah,
like a little hesitation though, and like the not the overt sexualness of it, but like we try to diminish it maybe.
yeah,
We try to pat it out a little bit. So I loved
yeah,
some
yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
like I was like, no, they're just like full on, they're going
Going
for
for
it.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
For like a little legend, like a little dictionary translation, I think.
it's my Shakespeare translation here on the
Yeah,
page. I was curious when you were growing up, what were the sort of films that you gravitated towards, or perhaps filmmakers who kind of got you interested in film? I'd love to know a little bit about your background. I know
yeah.
you've done short films, you've got a fairly extensive history in the world of film, and so I'd just love to know how you got started and what kind of sparked things for you.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, like growing up, it was funny because we didn't have access to everything. We had, a few channels on the telly, not many, four, I think it was, like when I was very young. And then we would get these VHS tapes that we would just wear down. Like so I think what was nice about that was I was watching certain things on repeat. Like, so I just know them like word for word. Like Cool Runnings is one that me and my sister just couldn't we couldn't stop. It would end and we'd like stick it back in the VCR and like rewind it and go again constantly. We were obsessed. And um Little Women, the 1994 Little Women with Winona Ryder and Christian Bale, that was another one that like I can recite that word for word. And so it was a lot of American films for me that we would end up getting these VHSs, and yeah, I was just like I couldn't get enough of them basically. So that was like my really early kind of film thing, I guess. But then I'm lucky enough that I got to study art, and then I went on and studied film. So I got to go through the full kind of art and film student experience of all the old and pretentious like film art world. And so I got lost in all of that. I got really into like Dogma 95 films like Anthony Dodd Mantle and Harmony Korine and Larry Clark. Like that was
Okay.
where I thought that I was like, this is the shit I want to do. Um which is kind of funny now because I don't think I would force myself to sit through them anymore. Um, Honestly. Like I will watch anything that Harmony Korine makes, but I think those other ones I'm amazed that I was able to watch them so many times. And then like I was able to sort of like come out of my film education with some knowledge of and a lot of art house kind of stuff. And then my husband, who I met around the same time, he was like, have you seen all the Die Hards and have you seen Star Wars? And it was all these like bigger films that I missed out when I was younger. And so somehow I've landed really nicely in between, and I just love kind of like American cinema, especially from the 90s. For this film, like I was watching Stand By Me and kind of other films that they didn't do that thing where they cast 20-year-olds playing kids, like or like all those kids in
Sure.
Stand By Me, literally kids. And I love that. And like Dazed and Confused was another big one. Uh for me watching this as well. That's
There,
sort of like my history of cinema
sure,
fandom.
sure. No, but there's at least speaking to the films that you were watching, maybe that informed a little bit of or that feels similar to how Ready or Not kind of feels when you look at A Stand By Me. Something I've always
Mm,
felt about casting great child actors. It's the reason I thought that the movie It, when they redid It Chapter One with all these
yeah.
young kids, there is something inside every human being, I think, when you watch an actual child who is scared, who is in a situation
Hmm.
that is uncomfortable and frightening. Even speak, I got little goosebumps kind of right now just thinking about it because there were so many moments in this film where, as lighthearted as it could be, as funny as it could be to watch some of the things the girls get into, when you start dealing with some of these older guys and you deal with some of the attention that they start paying or that they're really pushing on them, there was a
Hmm.
moment in the film where I think my smile and my laughter sank for a moment. And I was kind
Yeah.
of like, wait a minute. I was like, where are we going with this here? It started getting really real. And I think it's a
Hmm.
good thing. I think the uncomfortability that audiences will feel while watching this, it needs to happen. You kind of need to sit with this because in that dazed and confused way, similarly, there's a lot of humor in the film. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff you could look at it where you're like, a lot of that's really questionable for
Oh, yeah.
nowadays. Or when we look at unwanted ass smacks, different that there's so many
Yeah.
things that I don't even want to say that like it was fine back then. It flew, it happened,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then
It's the unfazed attitude towards it all is when you think about it, it's shocking, but it's like you also, I think through film, you get to experience it back then with them in real time in a way. So it's, yeah, it's a funny way of looking at things, definitely. It's kind of
no,
cool.
totally no, absolutely, because the film doesn't shy away from taking characters who are likable and showing you a darker side to them, or more a realistic side. When you think of Steo and you think of a young boy who is such good friends with these girls who
Hmm.
doesn't abandon them necessarily, but will take the side of his cousin, will take the side of the guys. Hey, they're just joking with you. They're not really, they don't mean anything by these advances where they're maybe trying to pull your clothes down even. And so it's just a joke.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Some of that was just heartbreaking to watch because I think people will bring in their own experiences. Everybody's been let down by a friend. Everyone's been disappointed by someone who didn't stick up for them or didn't kind of help them feel safe in
Mm.
that situation. When balancing the story, how delicate did you want to be with giving the lightness and the humor, but also still showing the realities of, a world where we don't have comprehensive consent knowledge.
I mean, I think it was just trying to stay really true to like Lynn was amazing in that she was able to craft this narrative. It's a piece of fiction, but she definitely was able to bring so much real life experience to it. So we were standing on real life and we were standing on truth, and that was for me a great position to be in because it straight away meant I have to go all the way with this stuff because you can't shy away. You can't get scared at the last sort of hurdle, and tame it back or kind of dilute it in any way. And so I think because all of these kinds of things have happened and keep happening to so many people, and boys included, we never wanted to really put the male characters on trial necessarily, but kind of show how ill-equipped someone can be. And I truly believe that Burner, he didn't realize what he was doing was overtly rape. I think he knew it was taking what he wanted at someone else's expense, but I don't
Sure,
think he ever knew, the full gravity of it, maybe, because that's how he grew up, learning that you just got to take what you want and it's they actually that's what they want you to do anyway. Um,
sure,
so we tried as best as we could to obviously balance that, but like, there's no denying that the girls are definitely getting taken from as
sure,
opposed to the boys who have this kind of like sense of ownership. The humor was, I guess, just balancing the light and the dark was just something that we felt. I think if even if these kids were a few years older, you mightn't have had as much of that, but I really wanted to feel like we're looking through the eyes of a 13-year-old and we're kind of
sure,
seeing the world in a nostalgic kind of way. And it is, and you look back and it does seem all kind of sunny and colorful. Yeah, we were always trying to kind of balance those two, but definitely just didn't want to um yeah, like minimize any of the kind of harm, I guess, that we can do at such a young age to each other.
sure,
Um, Even when we
sure,
think we're the good guy, and Steo is definitely the good guy, but he's just so ill-equipped to really do the right thing. He just doesn't have a clue.
sure.
Um,
Even the good guy can make mistakes and
yeah.
not step up in a moment where you hope they might. But I think you're right. Being ill-equipped to handle certain situations in life, I think there is this mistaken feeling of maturity that you feel at
Mm.
13, that you feel at 18. I can remember feeling like I'm finally an adult now. I should be able to go
Yeah.
off and do whatever. I'm so mature. And you look at a photo from yourself 10 years back even, and I was like, I was a child. I was a child. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything. I thought I was like, oh, I'm gonna be so cool hanging out in bars, talking to older people, whatever it might
Oh
be.
my
And you're
God,
like,
yeah.
you're a baby. You're a baby.
And you used to be proud of getting older friends and hanging out with older crowds. Like I know there was girls like even in the early noughties, in Dublin, it was like, oh, the girls who are 12 going out with 17-year-olds, like they're so cool. And now I'm like, oh fuck, that was highly illegal and like really creepy. But at the time I just thought that they were the coolest girls in school. So
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
we've come a
But
long way, I think, in with that stuff. But
no,
yeah, it was
absolutely.
definitely.
Something you mentioned about Burner though too that I did appreciate in the film because it doesn't necessarily jump to condemn any of the
Mm,
characters. It really does allow you to see what their life is like kind of behind those closed doors. Not that what happens to people excuses what they do to other
yeah.
people, but you can certainly see in moments like you said where Burner is ill-equipped. He believes, yes, what you want in life you just take, and you watch how people who were victims of abuse might then go on and abuse other people.
Mm, yeah.
And something that was just curious towards the end too that I felt is so much of the film revolves around these flats that they live in, and so much of the
Mm,
film is, hey, this is where we live. You're always going to be outside. You're seeing a lot of these people, and so you've got girls who go back and forth calling each other sluts one day, and then now we're all hanging out. Not that everybody's all buddy buddy, perhaps, but there is this feeling of you're not going to escape being around these
mm,
people, and so you do make sense of the life that you have, and you do try to, maybe you joke to play some things off, and you kind of roll with those punches. But I really, really appreciated how authentic this film felt, and just how many of these experiences did feel lived, and people who've experienced this. I think people are absolutely going to resonate with a lot of this, and I think it's going to challenge audiences in a great way. I was sitting there, and I had to let the film process for a couple days. I was like, I really, really enjoyed
yeah.
that, but I was like, it was so different from so many of the coming of age stories that I've experienced. And I was like, the Ready or Not title totally makes a lot more sense in terms
Yeah.
of what the girls were dealing with, and what those teenagers were dealing with. I was just curious to know a little bit about the collaboration with your screenwriter, Lynn Rowan. I've listened to a couple interviews, and I know she did the screenplay, but you kind of went back and forth. Was there anything that you felt like you wanted to bring in as far as taking her experiences and then kind of, speaking to some of your own? And was there even things that you kind of took from the younger actresses in the film to kind of flesh some of that story out?
Yeah, I think, well, it was amazing working with Lynn and myself and Ruth Cody, who's the producer. The three of us really worked, from getting this to as a little seed and into a treatment. And so that process was amazing and it was really collaborative. And Lynn had just, I mean, Lynn could have written 10 different Ready or Nots is the truth. She had so much kind of ideas and stuff she wanted to say and things she needed to get off her chest, I think. And then I suppose like what you're seeing is sort of like the things that maybe me and Ruth can also chime in on as well. So like even though the three of us are from different parts of Dublin, have grew up with very different experiences. I grew up in a very rural kind of part of Dublin, which was a whole other kind of thing. So there was a lot of stuff that Lynn was able to throw up in the air and me and Ruth were able to absolutely tap into and relate to and hopefully help her, craft it into the script. And I think what was lovely was trying to get Lynn to see the film through how I wanted to shoot it. And, so very early on I was getting imagery her way. And when she said Blue Bell, which is the location, it was amazing because she, without kind of realizing she was already on the same page as me with all this color, because Bluebell is just like terracotta reds and blues, blue sky usually. Well, not every day we shop, but you know, loads of green spaces and so it all sort of aligned then to do it in maybe not the stereotypical kind of working class 90s Dublin way, which would
Sure.
tend to be a little bit grey and a little bit washed out, So that was exciting to sort of get inside her head with all of that. Yeah. And then what was the end of your question? Because there was something that brought me to
Uh,
mind, but I can't. now.
Perhaps about
Oh, the
just
kids.
but working with the younger kids, or yes.
Yeah, so they were like a lot of the language and stuff they were so familiar with, so they were able to own that, and then kind of, I suppose there was a limit to how much of their own language they could bring because we didn't want to bring the film into, 2023 when we were shooting. But
Sure.
I think the very fact that they read the script, you're dealing with, at the time it was two 14-year-olds and two 16-year-olds. They read the script page to page, and I was like, tell me all your questions, like what's not making sense. And they were like, it all makes sense. It's all happening, and it's all this stuff is still getting said to us. So I was like, great, okay, that's a great start. And they just got it, so that in that way, I think that's why it feels so lived in, and the kids did such a good job because they were just able to own it and they just got it. And their
Uh,
parents, we had their parents on set every day, and they were also just they got it, and they were like, yeah, this is a story that needs to be told. And so everyone was just on board and really, yeah, really lived with the characters and the story in such a real way. It was amazing.
That's really wonderful, and I'm glad that the parents were able to be able to tap into that story as well, and support them and support
Mhm.
the telling of such an important story as well. It's
Yeah.
it's really cool to see you start to put your stamp on Irish filmmaking. I've got time for just one last question here. Now that you've done coming of age in your filmmaker world, is there a genre that you're looking forward to exploring now for your next films, perhaps? Or, is there something that you're looking forward to making as far as maybe a next feature goes? Or
Yeah, I definitely want to veer, way more into comedy. I think there's so much comedy in Irish humor, and yeah, just keep on telling kind of like female Irish stories. There's a few kind of percolating. There's a few scripts on the go at the moment, so I'm really hoping that we can kind of push one of them through the system very soon. And yeah, just tapping into that hilarious Irish female messy humor that I don't think we have it as much, as because again, like all my examples of kind of coming of age and comfort movies are all these American movies, and I think we still
sure.
have we still have loads to show in Ireland, which is really exciting actually.
I
We've still got lots in the tank.
I think so too. Every person who I've talked to about the film, about Ireland and everything, the general consensus from so many Americans tends to be love the accent, love the people, need more movies from Ireland. And
Amazing.
so
But we
so
will deliver.
I'm really looking forward to it. Claire, thank you so much for taking the time to be
Thank you
here.
so much, Nick. That was
Con
amazing.
Congratulations on the film. Ready or not, keep an eye out for it. This is coming of age necessity, and it is not from America, which makes it even more of a film that you need to seek out and support. So, thank you again, Claire.
Thank you, Nick. Have a great day. Thanks a
You
million.
too.